Yeah. Okay. I'll finish the sentence and the thought. I think it's definitely just doing body movements now.
We should just post our videos. At this point, I don't even care anymore. I'm like, yeah, sure. See how insane I am on tape.
A galactic pair of KKs
invites you to Space Cats Happy Hour.
Let your mind relax. We meet in a dimension outside of time,
where the playfully curious thrive.
So go on, fill your tin cup chalice with the sacred elixir of creativity. Laugh till you breathe violet flame at the game's absurdity. And above all, let out your full-throated song with us.
Here at Space Cats Happy Hour, with the galactic pair of KKs.
Hello, and welcome to Space Cats Happy Hour with American KK and Canadian KK. We are calling this a download dump episode, so we have no idea really where it's going, or at least I don't yet, but it's going to be fun. And I was just talking to Canadian KK before we recorded that I had been seeing little points of light, like little bright light, more pretty frequently and consistently throughout the last couple of weeks, and I'm pretty sure I'm starting to see fairies. So we will see how that transpires. But I'm super excited because I have a past life as a fairy, and I have a childhood love of fairies, even though I also have a healthy arm's length respect for not wanting to fuck with them in my life. So I've never really felt super connected, as in like I thought I was one until I got the past life reading as a fairy. So I'm like, okay, I feel more comfortable embracing that energy since I don't feel fear towards it anymore. So very exciting development. Anyway.
Yeah. And then every time we're three people, like we had the meeting with our buddy AOE and then our other buddy Rebecca, and then the orbs, the color orbs show up.
Yeah.
And those could be a lot of things, but they do make me think of sprites a little bit.
Ooh, I like that. Yes.
Yeah. So these gorgeous little orbs with like different colors and shapes. One of them had a heart shape. One of them looked like a little green orange jellyfish. Very magical.
Very magical. This has been a couple of really cool magical weeks that have passed. That have passed.
2022 like magic energy.
Mm-hmm. Which actually, I know you have a thing to say right off the bat, but like I have the records open and they told me to draw some cards, and so I have pulled the freedom. This is the Galactic Heritage deck. So I have pulled the freedom card for myself earlier, maybe like last week or whatever. And this one like flew out twice. I tried to not put it back, but I was putting it on the table and it like fell off. And anyway, it was catching my attention super hardcore today. And I was
jumped down into your throat.
basically. And then I also have graduation.
Oh shit. Yes.
So that feels pretty nice. And then these, which came out together, I guess alienness and graduation came out together. It feels like we're starting a new cycle of more and more people are waking up to realizing what they're here to do. The card on the bottom of the deck was new paradigm. So the people are waking up who have the blueprints that are going to start bringing in that new paradigm, or at least in a faster way than we've seen these past couple years. And then that last card was the first one that came out was progressive desires. So we're all like, let's go, bitches. And I think we're in a new cycle of really moving towards freedom, and freedom coming from fully integrating both the masculine and feminine and light and darkness, and in all of our polarities that we're starting to realize aren't either good or bad. They just are. And so that feels kind of what that message is. And maybe we'll get more insight on those cards as we go. But I know that this was the spread the records wanted me to have for today. So we'll see what else comes up. Anyway.
Yeah. And that was, that connects to what we talked about on an earlier podcast episode where I was talking about the light dark ratios.
Mhm.
And then I did an updated video on it, which was like, oh, you know, when you're in your ideal balance of light and darkness, it's when you feel integrated, when they no longer seem separate to you. And that's like, and then I was like, yeah, exactly what you're saying. I was like, oh, that's the energy of 2022 is two things polarities coming together, you know, like exactly that, light, dark, masculine, feminine, mind, body.
Yeah.
Good, bad.
Yeah. It's interesting because I saw that you posted, I was on Instagram for once last night and I saw you had posted your follow-up to the light dark ratio video. I had the feeling that when I was talking about my ratio of 60-40, at first I thought 60 was the light amount. I think it's the dark amount now.
Oh.
And I don't know if that means it switches off and on. Like it could be, I don't know that I'm meant to always stay in that darkness, but I think to that extent, but I think that there are times when I'm, my balance perfect ratio is a little bit more in the darkness. And then I can kind of swing back into being a little bit more in the light, just because depends on what I'm doing at the time, I guess, like which energies I'm trying to anchor in or process or transmute or whatever.
That's so interesting. And just to give the tiniest catch up, just in case somebody's listening and is like, what? So originally I had this thing come to me where it was like, I wanted to ask my guys, I was like, wait, what would be my ideal in day-to-day life balance of being in light energies or dark? And where am I at right now? And for me, they originally said, well, right now you're at 60-40, 60 light, 40 dark. And for you, ideally it's 72-28, which was very specific. And that's where I ended up looking up 72-28. And Google was like, would you like to look at this philosophical text entitled The Indivisible Remainder? And so I was like, just reflecting, I was like, indivisible remainder. Oh, right. That's wholeness. That's integration. That's what blah, blah, blah. But when I was asking other people like you, it was really, as I initially thought, I was like, oh, I bet people are going to be all over the spectrum with this. And also I had this kind of feeling, I was like, I bet it's in flux. You know, it's not like necessarily a static.
That ties in then.
But exactly what you just said. That's so interesting.
That is so interesting.
Yeah. I'm so like, I feel like there's so many fun ways to play with this game of like ratios, just for like exploring what works and what feels good and what doesn't. And stuff.
I love that you explore those rabbit holes of specific numbers. You're so good at taking what you channel and then like, let's look more into that. Where do these numbers go? And it's like, it is so cool that you find all these extra context tie-ins, like the philosophical text and all that stuff. It's just, I'm excited to see how it develops.
Year and a half of my wake up was basically just that. I think because I enjoy mysteries and kind of like those types of like puzzles so much, they were like, okay, we're going to just flood you with things. And so because I was also in this very interesting position with my awakening where I had a lot of flexibility with my time. So I was able to just go down any rabbit hole. I mean, because it was very energetically draining. Also, because I was that period, like we were collectively being pumped with so many frequencies and stuff too. So I would spend days and weeks just frantically typing notes, going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole, like anything I saw, I was like, that's something, I'm going to follow it. And it would be like some weird thing. It was like that would take me to an obscure text about the Syrians and their staying on planet Earth, like,
awesome.
You know, where it was like, whoa, stuff I'd never heard of. And then I'd spend the rest of the time just kind of like lying in bed, just having like energies flood through me and also feeling completely mentally and psychologically unstable. And like, I was really high on acid 24/7.
Sounds familiar.
That was like my template. Constant synchronicities and rabbit holes was like my awakening template.
Which is why I think you're a really good guide for showing other people the magic and the synchronicities that I don't know, every time I'm with you, you'll point out something completely obvious and on the nose. And I'm like, duh. You know, it's so
I've
cool.
never, before 2019, the phrase on the nose, like I don't think I'd ever used it in my life or ever really had it used in context of me. And the number of times, like I've had people be like, wow, that is on the I am the person who's here to hit you over the head with a hammer that, yep, you're not making it up. Like reality is bizarre. And that thing you're like, oh, your skepticism is like, maybe that's a coincidence. I'm here to be like, boom, there's no way that's a coincidence because it's going to happen 13 times in an hour.
It really is. I feel like my magic just ramps up whenever it's around you. And I know that in part it's just you helping me notice it, but like it also just feels like you actually activate more of me. And it's really fun.
That's cool.
So I think you're a really good guide for that. And I'm glad you post your videos that you do, because they're it's that guidance, that people who don't even know you can find. And it's just, anyway, it's very cool. So I'm glad you do those. It's fun.
Well, I'm excited for this episode. I have been feeling so constipated with random downloads because an issue that I have is like not time management, but just like navigating time, and jumping from task to task can be really hard for me. So I get these downloads and then I just don't have like an outlet for them. So then finally I was like, just put them in a podcast episode all at once. Who cares if it's chaotic?
Hell yes. Welcome to the chaos episode. That's so, oh my God. I just joined a D&D group for the first time in my life. I've been wanting to do this since I was in middle school, but I was never allowed. And then like, I just didn't have the time. And then I was afraid to join a group because I was like, oh, I'm too old. I don't know shit. Anyway, this time I just jumped for it. So there's a group of astrologers that I'm in a Discord with, and everyone was like, do you want to start a D&D game? I've never DM'd before, but if I can help the new people. And I was like, sweet, a person who's never DM'd, and then like a bunch of people who've never actually played before anyway. So we're all just learning new skills together. And I built my character, and you have to choose an alignment, like chaotic, neutral, whatever. And I couldn't decide between chaotic, neutral, and chaotic good. But I think I chose chaotic good because I was like, I need chaos. There's an element of chaos in me that just has to be in this character.
Yay.
And it's really fun. So yeah, I love the chaos. Bring it.
I think that's just going to bring so much into your life.
I think so too.
I'm very excited for you. Completely random side note. I just realized today because I'm going to Costa Rica, and it was very much, it just came out of the blue. My friend was like, I'm going to be going for the month. And I was like, dang, I think I have to go with you for a part of the time. Costa Rica had been kind of floating on my radar, but not. I've had a weird thing with travel because I used to love travel so much. And then I got all this baggage around it. And so I've felt very limited in my ideas of where I could go in the world and like how enjoyable it would be. And I would get very like, I would want to stay at places where it's like, well, I'll understand the language, or like, it's not that far, blah, blah, blah. And so this is very much stepping out of my comfort zone. And then I hadn't even really stopped to consider like why Costa Rica. But then I was like, oh my God, I'm supposed to go to places with trees. Like San Francisco, I ended up right next to, like, the place I picked was like right next to this hiking trail with all these beautiful old growth trees. And the neighborhood was full of old growth trees. And I ended up visiting the forest. And I was like, oh, obviously I'm going to connect with the trees there. So I got really excited about that today. I was like, right. Again, like the term grid worker, I don't really feel like it really is how I would call myself. But I think that there's an aspect of that when I'm traveling that is a bit of connecting to the earth in that way. So
100%.
So yeah, I'm going to Costa Rica.
Well, your guides earlier in 2021 were like, you should learn Spanish. And you were like, what?
Yep. And of course, with my ADD brain chaos, like I was like, okay, I got this like special on sale Rosetta Stone package. Started it a bit, completely forgot about it. And so now I've just been like frantically going back and like trying to get anything in my brain before I go. Luckily, my friend is fluent and I'll be with him the entire time. So it's not like a very high stakes situation, how much Spanish. It's more just like an ego thing. If I can actually.
Well, yeah. And it's also, it feels just a little bit more respectful. Well, to me, I don't know about you, but it feels like people who learn even please and thank you, if that's all they can manage, that just feels like a respectful thing to do, to go to someone else's country and just have just try. And no one expects you to be perfect and you don't have to like be a suck up or whatever about it. But like, it just feels nice to have a little bit of effort into that. When I went to Iceland, I was like frantic. I was like, I would get YouTube videos of like how to pronounce shit, because I'm like, I do not know how to read these words. And I at least learned please and thank you. And of course, everyone speaks English, but it was still nice to be able to say little something to the people.
Oh my God. And like the wildcat sinks have been really wild in the general collective at large, especially like people I know and myself, just in time for the Year of the Tiger. There are so many adorable little wildcats. There's like a cat, I forget what it's called, but it's smaller than an ocelot. It's like a little tiny house cat sized ocelot. It's so
I want to see one.
Me too, desperately.
That sounds awesome. I'm glad you brought up the water tiger thing, because I think that's another that I wanted to say out loud on a podcast, or at least to you or whatever. The water tiger is a literal mix of masculine and feminine energies. The tiger has the yang energy and the water has the yin receiving energy. And and February is also the water tiger month, which apparently when a year of like an animal year and an animal month lining up at the same time, like that is very unusual. So it's like in our face, it's on the nose, like literally, here you go, 2022.
That's so interesting. I've also never seen the Lunar New Year be embraced so much. Like my feed is just, for me at this point, if I'm getting flooded with stuff that's like brand advertising, like I don't care that it's brands. I'm like, oh, this is just like my personal algorithm bringing me more tigers. But yeah, like I've never seen people and corporations embrace Lunar New Year so hardcore. It's just like all I see is tigers everywhere.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
So I guess we really need a lot of tiger energy.
Yeah, we apparently do, which is, hey, let's do it, man. I'm excited.
And it's funny to think, like, somebody had a post, it was like Happy Lunar New Year, and it was showing all the tigers from pop culture and cartoons. And it's funny how many of them are so bouncy and happy too. Like you've got Tigger and then Tony the tiger. Like they're very like positive, you know. Of course, you've got Hobbs, who's a bit more contemplative and like wry. But like that, it's just interesting that there is that, like, that tiger energy kind of carries that like boing.
Yes. Well, and even
what I feel like I'm in right now. I feel like Tigger right this second. 3 milligrams of decaf coffee in my bloodstream. I feel like my seat is going to eject me into the stratosphere.
Amazing. I don't have very many books anymore. I used to be like a book collector, you know, the person that has bookshelves everywhere. And I just can't. Part of my Great Awakening, Dark Night of the Soul shit, I was like, get rid of everything. I don't want possessions. So I have very few books left that I actually kept with me from a move to move kind of thing. And one of them is a Calvin and Hobbes book. And it's interesting that even Hobbes, with his little bit more quiet, not reserved, but like that wryness of his humor, it's still that, because Calvin is like very much that inner child, and like, so it's still that same, even though Hobbes isn't exactly Tigger about shit. It's like Calvin is like, yeah, it's
true. And like all of those images of them sliding and stuff. I don't think anything made me laugh harder at that age than the one where they had the transmogrifier box, and Calvin wants to be a tiger, and he comes out with his little tiny short legs, so he's like this little tiny short tiger next to Hobbs.
The best. Oh my god. Now all I want to do is pull up my notes from that dream module, the shamanic dream module, where we went through the chakras and all the animals and stuff came up. But I definitely had a tiger show up in my root chakra area, and I was like, oh yeah, that's the place I feel least safe. Like that's what I've been I guess that's what I've been transmuting for the last years, my purge, and just the purge of the blocks we have around security and that kind of thing, which is the root chakra. So I've been in that, which I think we all have been this past year. But so the fact that a tiger showed up there, I was like, I felt like a tiger was very strong and confident energy. And I was like, that is not how I feel in my root chakra. But I appreciate you showing up, because maybe I'm not giving myself enough credit or something.
Yeah. Well, I think that's definitely why it would show up, right? Is to like support and boost and encourage and help you. Speaking of root chakras, that planning a trip to Costa Rica in the midst of total financial turmoil and like the biggest financial losses that I've ever sustained in like a space of a few months. And then it was also like, oh, and your one source of stable income, it's like, would you like that to be cut in like by a third? It was like, but
Thank you, Venus retrograde.
Yeah, I was getting so many signs from to like, no, you have to do this trip. You have to do this trip. Like, this is the whole point, is the trust fall. Woo!
You were anchoring in that energy really, really well. I am grateful for that.
But
it feels a little bit flaily and a little bit not fun at the time, but you're doing a great job. So
thank you.
I'm glad you're going. I think this will be a really good trip and I'm excited to hear about it.
So on that theme of bouncy Tigger energy, not at all, you will see. The first item on my list was, I've been thinking a lot about hell realms lately. Okay, first I will just say hilariously. So yesterday I've been reflecting on hell realms and wanting to talk about it. So when my mind goes to something, then it shows up in the reality. So yesterday I felt like I was put through like the most hilariously mild version of like a hell realm ever, where it was my partner had the day off. So I was like, yay. And I didn't sleep super well. Lately, I've been not having so much misophonia problems of like super sensitivity to sound, and my nervous system feels like a raw scraped nerve because of this new medication. But for some reason, yesterday it was back in full force. So I had that, but we got up really early and I was like, oh, we'll get a head start on the day. And then we had all this time, and then there was just a very blah energy, and it was very gray. And even though we got out and like ran errands, it just had this like flatness to it. And then we just wanted to like watch some movies. Sometimes I have trouble taking time off and relaxing into it. So I was kind of in that state of feeling like I should be doing. And I was like, just relax. So we were trying to find a movie, and they were all just like outlandishly bad. And they would be like, oh, this movie was really well reviewed. And then it was like, oh, good God. So we kept having to start movies and then stop. Just like the most mild version of like a bad, but like, yeah. But it was really, and I just had this like feeling of such boredom. And eventually we settled on the movie Constantine, which I had been wanting to see for a while, which is really funny because it's all about going in and out of hell realms.
I love that movie so much. Oh my God.
But like, and this is not like a commentary on the movie at all, but like, I just really did not enjoy it.
Fair enough.
I couldn't get into it. No, but it's like that. I no longer believe that has any, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I used to think like that mattered if I thought a movie, and now I'm like, nope, everybody has their own opinions and who cares? Very liberating. It's nice to feel that way.
Hell yes.
And so I was just really wasn't getting into it. And I was just like, ugh. And then we made our supper, but I forgot to put the garlic. So it was just like a very, and then the eggs were overcooked. So it was just like, everything was just so not an actual problem, nothing that's actually worth really ever getting upset about. But it was just like, and I was like, oh, I'm like, I will take this. I was like, if this is the type of hell realm that I'm sending myself to right now, then I will 100% take it.
Man, that is so weird how similar our days were yesterday, because I felt like it was more than blah, but like it was also, I had this like anxiety and dread and like gross feeling in my body. But at the same time, I felt like that was really lower. Like I was standing above being like drowned in it or whatever, so I could breathe clear air. And I was like strangely okay, even though I was not okay. And I even had to lie on the floor at one point because I was just like, I cannot take this. I don't know what's in my body right now, but I feel like shit. And I even like tears would leak out of my eyes. I knew that it was just like a release of something. And then I realized, I was like, wow, this, whatever I am processing, I feel like I'm strong enough to do it now, or maybe it's not as strong. Like I didn't know. So I was like, I think we just leveled up to a huge extent, because like that kind of stuff or whatever we had called to us would be debilitating for me. Like I would be on the floor and unable to get up. And this time I was able to just lie there for a few minutes and let it kind of come out. And then I was like, okay, get back up and go about my day. And it felt like it moved through completely at that point. And I was like, what? That was easy, but like not fun still, oh wait, sorry. One more thing about that, because you're talking about hell realms, and I I started watching the second season of the OA. One of the main characters was wearing a shirt with Virgil on it. And I almost texted you. I was like, no, not more Virgil. I thought we were out of the underworld. I was like, what's going on? And so
yes, the Virgil sinks and then the purgatories and stuff. I feel like, okay, so part of it for me, because I was just feeling very bored and over everything. Like I couldn't dredge up any excitement for anything that was happening, which is very normal, after this long in a pandemic too, like scraping the bottom of the barrel of like entertainment on like a gray, cold February day to be like a bit over it and bored. But that also feels like the feeling of leveling up, what you just said, when you're just like so over with what the current reality is that you're ready for something different. And that helps you like shift out of it. But I also think that it was also like, that is kind of one of the core wounds that I'm still sort of peeling away at, is that feeling of dissatisfaction or like just blah. You encounter that in so many spiritual people. It's just a general feeling of like meh about being on Earth. And I think it's definitely like a programming that we have that is like one of those core wounds. And it's one of those slick ones, I always say the thing that you think is the most outside your spiritual awakening, the thing that you think, oh, I would be able to do this if it weren't for this thing. And you put that thing outside yourself and outside of the awakening. It's like, no, that's actually the deepest core wound that you're actually came here to like move through and integrate and transmute. And kind of dissatisfaction and lack of excitement is a very
huge for me.
Common one.
Yeah.
But connected to that is also, we're doing so much trauma repair and trauma healing. And the side effect of trauma on the system is I can never pronounce it properly, but like anhedonism, not being able to experience the full spectrum of happiness and joy. And like, it like puts a damper on stuff and like physiologically.
Yeah.
And so that's also kind of like a component of it to work through, is like allowing our nervous system and our hormone levels and our neural pathways and our brain stuff to heal to the point where we can feel those sparks again.
I had a dream a couple nights ago. I was pretty sure it was completely related to ancestral clearing, because I was trying to drain a bathtub and it was so gross. Like there was shit in there that I was like, I don't want to even put my hand in the water to unplug the drain. And then the next thing I knew, I was looking at it and my grandfather had cut a hole in the drain from underneath it, so it would drain into the basement. And I was like, thank you, Jesus, for that. Thank you, ancestors, for the help on clearing this in the dreamscape, because apparently whatever it was, I didn't want to be consciously clearing it while I was awake. We do a lot of work in the dreamscape on things that are pretty hard. So I was like, yes, let's clear out that ancestral trauma.
Yeah, right. So the topic of hell realms. So, okay, some of this isn't fully fleshed out, but again, I'm not going to let that stop me from running my mouth. It was really you that got me off on this when you were saying that our perception of the underworld is distorted and we often project like hell realms onto the underworld. And I do feel like the way that holographic multidimensional reality works is like you can step in and out of all of these different versions of Earth, and some of them are hell realms. And it's all about, hell realms are just, our collective ideas of what suffering is. Sometimes it's individual and sometimes it's collective, and like creating a reality out of that. But you can like move in and out of them in this very weird way, which is something that I did while I was in San Francisco. I moved in and out of the same terrible space that is dealing with like so much baggage of oppression and class warfare, and I'm sure a million things beyond that. But within a space of a few hours, I moved through the exact same 10 blocks, and they were completely different. And because my mindset had shifted, like my internal had shifted. So that idea of being able to just like zoop in and out of our hell realms is kind of interesting. I really think with the Earth as a whole, so much of like, I'm at the point where I feel I get fired up and angry because I'm at the point where I'm pulling away from this idea that I used to hold very close to my heart. So now it makes me really angry to see it, because I'm like, no, I don't want you anymore. And it's this idea that of like you reap what you sow, and that as a species, we have to pay these terrible prices for what we've already done and the mistakes that we've made and the way we've treated our planet. Now we have to pay the price, and it's going to be so awful and tortuous. And the best we can hope for is hopefully the species will, part of their species will survive and we'll find a new way, and yada, yada, yada. And all of that just really repulses me right now. And I really think it's like these very old school ideas about right and wrong and punishment and self-punishment, and like very religious ideas of like, dogma about like heaven and hell and having to pay and atone. And it's like, why would we wish that on ourselves when we're like, why would the same people that are dreaming of utopias want to spend time projecting that into the future, especially knowing that if you're projecting that into the future, it's going to hit the most marginalized people the hardest. So like, where is the benefit to, I know the reasons behind it. I'm not, anyway, but I don't want to get into a lot of yada, 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 but like, I'm just at the point where it's like, if we let go of these self-imposed shackles of what the future has to be like because of what the past has been, and really open ourselves up to the potential for like real miracles to happen, like we can move towards gentler and gentler versions of the future. And I know this is me like restating something I've already said in Europe. So, but I think this is something I can't say often enough.
I agree. I was just going to say, it's really good that you're anchoring in that awareness of that conscious paradigm shift, really, where we don't have to hang on to the story of like, oh, because we did this, now we can only do this, and we can't expect miracles because you have to go through the steps and put in the hard work, blah, blah, blah. No, the more you heal within yourself, which is in itself hard work, but like you can literally shift your perspective, the more you heal inside and create that better earth that has those miracles of like, yes, we can have this technology that magically cleans up the oceans or whatever the fuck the miracles are. But having that anchored energy of knowing that is possible just helps raise the collective to like also recognizing it and taking it in telepathically and creating like, more of that.
And just turning your attention towards the solutions that already are being, like they already exist. There's already fungi that eat petroleum, right? There's already people designing things that clean the plastics out of the ocean. There's already, Nikola Tesla already designed a system for having electricity without like free electricity for everyone. Mm-hmm. That may or may not be completely accurate. But like these things, like there's already like templates and prototypes and things. And it's like, we just, instead of really turning our laser focus on those, we just say, it's not going to be enough, or it's too late, or it's too little, or there's almost, I mean, I know it's just on the one hand, it's a trauma response. And also it's like an ego thing of like, the more you get into releasing ideas about what is and isn't possible, the harder your ego screams at you to like, no, it's not possible. I am at the point, especially with people in the spiritual community that are like talking about things like the fact that unity consciousness, that they really believe in it. And then they really believe that our imaginations create reality. And then they're still spinning stories about how hard things are going to have to be, and how like spinning stories of like spiritual warfare and stuff. I'm at the point where I'm like very angry about that stuff. And I just have to step away. And I know that everybody is playing their role and doing what they're supposed to do. But like that stuff right now, I'm like, no. It's like, stop it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I've had to kind of stay away from a lot of things I used to listen to regularly, just because I'm like, I think this is here to trigger me or whatever. Or yes, everyone's playing out their role. And I'm just like, okay, if you're here to trigger me into only listening to myself, good job, because that's what I'm doing now.
Which it is. And also, I think because I'm still seeing them, it's like, it's playing out for me to like release my us versus them, because that's still just like showing me that part of me, that my ego that's still, but what if it all does go to shit and blah, blah, blah. And I also think there's important acceptance work that happens around what's going to happen on Earth and stuff. There is very important stuff to do with like accepting, but it's like, for me, I'm like the aughts. Yes, the aughts were a time, and the 90s were a time where people were very much in denial about the underpinnings of like corruption and oppression and all that stuff. But like, we haven't been in that space for a long time. So I don't feel like those narratives of like shadow work in that aspect of facing the hard facts is as pertinent now as it was in 2010, when people were just starting to be like, wait a second. It's like we've had over a decade now, including a pandemic, of very much sitting in our worst fears and accepting very difficult things, and like, you know, accepting loss and change and death and transformation.
We've done a lot more growing than we're giving ourselves credit for, or at least each other for, maybe. I don't know what the...
each other. Anywho, that was kind of a long tangent. Maybe I'll ask
I like that. I think we need to reiterate that too, because not enough people are saying it. They're in that story of like, it has to be hard. Or, you know, anyway, I think it's good that we're talking about it. Yeah, as you were talking, I just got this, and partly because I pulled the Progressive Desires card, because like usually that for me means I'm pushing too hard for things to be changed already, because it needs to take time, and you can't just like blast through, because, you know, everything needs to unfold in a way that doesn't scare other people or whatever. But this time when I pulled it, especially with the spread, like I didn't feel that resistance anymore. It was like no, it's actually possible now to make this rapid change. And it's not a thing that you need to be like, oh, too scared to think about in that same spiritual way where it's like, oh my God, it's going to be so hard. And, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, it can actually move faster now, especially, I don't know, the energy feels like it's flowing more towards
I think it's also just me finding more and more confidence in my ability to say that, because I used to be very scared of like putting that out there, and it felt like, I'm like, oh, is this irresponsible? Blah, you know, all my old ideology and programming around what's socially responsible and ethical and stuff. I had to work through, and also like people pleasing things around like, well, but what if people think I'm like an oblivious asshole?
That is very interesting that this is coming up for you as a thing that you're working through literally publicly as we're going around recording this, because one of the things I've been hearing from the records, not just from me, but from other channelings, is don't water down your message, and don't try to do that people pleasing thing, because that's what we're all healing, that wound of people pleasing and codependency and all that shit or whatever right now. So it's important, at least from the record standpoint, of don't water yourself down right now, because you need to, that's part of the process of clearing that people pleasing codependency stuff that we all have. And the more you are just like, I'm saying my message, some people are not going to like it. Some people might get super fucking angry, and other people might, you know, accept it, and, you know, whatever the range of reactions is, it's important now, especially going forward, to just not water down what you're saying, or be afraid to say it, or be like, well, what I mean is this, and don't do it in a mean way, and blah, blah, blah. No, just fucking say it and have people take it the way they are going to take it. And you don't have time or energy to waste on controlling their experience of your words, I guess.
Yeah, who wants to control other people's experience of their words? Ultimately, that's such a liberating thing too. And I think for me, it's really just getting to that place where I can really feel peaceful internally, that it's like, I think for me, it's still that place of urgency and scarcity where that is the biggest trigger for me right now, as opposed to the people pleasing was a big one. But now I think it's just clearing out the fear. I'm like, but what if there are people who are just not listening to that message? And I'm like, that's their path. They are supposed to be on their path, and I don't control their path. And that is fine. Like, kind of disentangling, like the urgency I'm feeling to put this out is because it's very true for me, and it's important for me to express things that are very true for me, but not have it be like getting away from the idea that the urgency behind it is because if I don't get this out and then other people don't also feel the same way, then it's catastrophe and cataclysm all over again.
I have been getting a lot of those same messages of, remember to look at this as a game, and everyone has chosen their character, their lessons they want to learn, their little path through the video game that we're all playing or whatever. And it's like, you don't know what their souls chose to come down here to do. So you don't try to keep interfering with that energetically, which is a huge wound of mine that I'm working on. So I get messages constantly of like, zoom out. What are they doing at a soul level? And you're not necessarily going to know on your human level, but your souls obviously do. But
and like
they
are they're a god, just like no matter what mindset a person is in and how you feel about it, they are just as much a god as I am. They are another part of me and I am another part of them.
Yep.
It is that separation stuff that is so traumatizing.
So
like,
traumatizing.
no,
yeah.
We're at odds, and that being at odds is like very, very dangerous, like leaving that stuff.
Totally.
Behind.
Well, we're also just clearing out we're in these final stages, and I don't know how long final stages actually means. It's not going to be tomorrow. I don't know. I just don't know how many years, but we're in that final stage of clearing out a lot of soul contracts that had been in place for 13,000 years since the fall of Atlantis, because that's that cycle we're closing out. And so we're like, wait, we've held on to these karmas, these soul contracts, all these things for this long, but does it really need to continue that way? And so a lot of souls are trying to figure out how to get those soul contracts kind of unbounded together so that they can go off and learn something new. And it's like, we've cleared out those ties, which were not bad. We were here together playing game and it was fun and all that stuff. But now it's like, oh, wait, we can play different games now. And so whatever's going on at the soul level to rewrite those contracts is not something we're used to, because we're used to those old soul families being together so closely for 13,000 years. And it's like, what do you mean I can let them play their game? Our karma has been to be codependent or, whatever. And it's a really hard one to clear out, but that's, it's getting easier. I can tell because of I can feel more neutral about that when I get those messages to zoom out and not ignore the suffering, but look beyond it as part of a lesson or whatever. Because I don't like to see people suffer. If people are in pain, I'm like, but I could make it better if I told them this or did this or carried it for them energetically or whatever. And it's like, you can't do that anymore. That's not part of your new story. So be more neutral about it. And yeah, like I said, it's getting a little bit easier, but it's final stages are really...
And I feel we're revisiting Atlantis stuff, but from, at least for me, and I think for you too, and other people probably, like a different place of healing of it. But for me, the Atlantis wound very much plays out just in terms of what you were saying about like watching people suffer around and like, of course, feeling like I don't want to see my loved one suffer. For me, the Atlantis wound very much plays out as like decision paralysis, getting really caught up in the mental space of, is there anything I should do? Is there absolutely nothing? Is this overstepping, or is this just compassionate support? Is this codependent? Is this, and like every possible decision that I face, at the end of it, it's like, and if I get it wrong, I'm fucked and they're fucked, right? Like, again, also like putting all the responsibility for everything on me, which is like another aspect of bring it back. They are God, don't worry. But also that feeling that any decision, it's the part of Atlantis where like they were very confident in a decision they made and it led to great calamity. So then you just become terrified of ever making a decision. Yeah.
It also kind of sounds like you knew a lot of people who got left behind and you got out. You made a, whatever your decision, I almost said smart decision, but I didn't mean it that way. It was like you felt it was the way to go to get the fuck out. And you were trying to figure out if you could convince other people to come with you to save them. Or if you were like, no, it's their game. Or maybe you tried to convince them and they, there was a wounding there where they rejected your advice or something. Anyway, it feels like a lot of end of age catastrophe.
Yeah, definitely that role. But I played others as well. I had a dream. I've had a few dreams that showed me the different roles that I played in Atlantis. I had a really interesting Atlantis dream. It was so vivid and it was showing me like so many things, but there was definitely one where I was one of the people, again, why this is such a trigger for me, what I was just saying, like, I can't look at it. No, I was one of the people going around freaking the fuck out and raising everyone's terror levels of like being like, we're fucked. We're like that, like a lot of that energy. And then there was also one where it was getting out, like I saw it like going through a portal and getting out. And there was another one where I was like holding the portal open for other people to go through. And then there was one where I jumped into the sea and turned into one of like those sea creatures, but then I got fucking squished by this huge ship that was like coming in. So I think I experienced a lot of different aspects of the Atlantis disaster. So I think I do have a lot of baggage, but definitely that is one of them. The one of trying to help people get out, and then some of them didn't make it.
That makes so much sense. I still don't remember any Atlantis stuff for me. I'm sure that I was there, but I just don't have any memories unlocked. And I hesitated when I said I'm sure I was there, because I'm like, am I though? Like, what if I was just observing, you know? And then I just started. So I don't know.
I think observing was also very painful to be just like watching from afar.
That's how it's always
I think
felt.
a lot of our galactic selves are also carrying trauma and wounds, even if they're whatever 6th, 10th, and 86th. Like they're still, it doesn't like make them immune to trauma and baggage and stuff as well.
That makes a whole lot of sense, especially as a record keeper. Now that I know that that's a thing I'm like, I can feel that observational tendency in me. And I know it's partly my Aquarius placements, because that, hello, Aquarius, the observer, much. And I almost get, I don't know what the word is, what the descriptor word is. I was going to say angry, but then I feel it's not angry. It's partly anger and partly like discomfort at looking at that shadow, because I don't want it to be true, that it's so easy for me to zoom out and observe people in not great situations and be okay. That doesn't feel good to me, but I'm so capable of doing that there's a war between my observer self and my like, that feels inhumane as an attitude to have in my body that feels so easy to access. But it makes sense, because that's what a record keeper would do if they're just recording shit and not interfering. So
yeah, you're like a war journalist, right? Like I'm sure they have tons of internal stuff about what they go through.
That makes sense. Look at you giving me more obvious points that I have not actually put together. And you're like, here, duh, on the nose.
It's interesting, because just when you were talking about Atlantis, and then I was going back into the different roles, and that one where I was holding the portal open, because this ties back to when I finally circle around to my original point about the Hell Realms. 50 minutes later, that portal, because I keep seeing it from the perspective, and this is kind of what I want to say to people. And in fact, I just had a session this week where I did talk to somebody about this. If you suddenly opened a trap door and were staring down into hell, and you see all these miserable people just, and like, they're like, and you're like, oh shit. And you're like, hey, there's a trap door right here. Come on. And then at first they can't even hear you, because they're so wrapped up in their torment and suffering. And then maybe like one of them finally, you're like, hey. And then one of them looks up at you and you're like, and they're like, oh no, I couldn't possibly, like, I'm chained here, as you can see. And you're like, oh yeah, but you wrap those around yourself, like those chains, you can just unwrap them. And they're like, oh no, that would take forever. And then they're like, look, see this huge like demon guarding the door. And you're like, oh, actually that's just like a paper, like a cardboard cutout of a demon. And they're like, oh no. So anyway, so it was that idea of there's this trap door and the people are in hell, and they and so I was like, well, what is that thing? And I think for each person it can be different, and also it can be multiple things, but a lot of the time it boils down to they get to the point, they've heard you, they've started to unwrap their chains that are just like wrapped and not actually locked in. They have at least a little bit of trust that demon is actually a cardboard cutout, but then they're like, but look at all of these people that are still here. I can't leave them behind, especially like if it's their loved ones, right? And you're like, no, but the more of you that walk out of here, the easier it's going to be for other people there. They're going to start to see people walking out through this trap door, and then everyone is it's that thing.
That's awesome, KK. Wow.
So it's really, I think it's another, for me, feels like a fruitful like thought exercise of like, what is the thing? Because when I was in this, and I always feel it when I feel myself in the hell realm, or someone else when I'm doing the energy work, I always feel it as like dragging down on the feet and the legs. It's like this like painful constricting drag. It's like you can't let go of this anchor. So
Yeah.
in the session that I was doing this week, it was very funny because I immediately heard, I was like, oh, what's anchoring this person? And it was like, I still need to finish something. So again, I think it's just interesting to see what comes to you if you ask yourself that question. Because yeah, it could be this idea of a soul contract, but actually you can just break that soul contract. Or for that person, I kind of got into also like the idea of needing to finish things at all. We can let go of that as even as a belief that things need to be finished. And yeah, for me, I think I'm going to have to do a little more digging in myself, but I think it's definitely, I can't leave because there are so many other people here. So it's not cool to, it's not, why would I walk out when there are other people? And also I think there's still some, like, I don't deserve to leave yet. Like, I think I'm still holding on to a chain of like, I did something bad. So I still need to be punished a bit. I think those are my two main remaining ones. There might be something else in there. I'm not sure, but
wow, that hit real hard. Damn. It's probably a couple of my own anchors as well that I share with you.
Hell realms.
That was such a beautiful way of describing the work that we're doing, being here on this planet right now, where we're not only are we healing our own anchors to the underworld or to the hell realms, but we're also at the same time able to show people that there is a trap door. And so we're like, no, really, come on up. Just by,
but it's funny because it's like, I feel like my higher self, which really just feels like my future self to me, is like fully in that trap door, like, fuck. And I am like still in hell, pointing towards the other trap door. And then it's like, it's not super convincing if you're actually still in hell pointing to this trap door and not actually moving towards it. I'm like, good call. I feel like I'm like that. Slowly moving towards it, but dragging this huge boulder. And I'm like, look, everybody, it's so easy.
That's how I feel.
Oh, no, it's so easy.
That is oh my God, that is, I am the sinks that we fucking have. And I keep forgetting that I even have this thought, but because I've been wanting to talk to you about it, but yeah, that's how I feel too, where I'm like, I am slowly, I fully am aware that demon guarding the gate is cardboard, but I'm still too afraid to walk up to it. Even though I completely know that it's fine, I just don't know how to get there. And then, and the trap door. So I'm like kind of also telling people about this trap door, but still scared of the cardboard demon. But I feel like it's when I was examining that feeling and I kind of went into it because I was judging myself for it. I was like, Jesus Christ, why can't I get my shit together and get out of the situation that I don't want to be in, or make the reality that I actually want to experience? Like, why am I still in this fear-based matrix when one foot is clearly in the future, in the new world kind of thing? So I went into it because I was like, here's a shadow. Let's just kind of integrate it and not judge yourself for it, or like at least entertain that you don't need to judge yourself for feeling however you're feeling. So when I went into it further and I was like, I feel like I am on a string of one part of a nervous system string, for lack of a better descriptor. I don't know what the fuck it looks like. And it's like the healing that my higher self, which I am with you, I feel like it's my future self, she's already healed or whatever. And her heal it's like kind of slowly trickling down to me. And I know that my healing is inevitable and that I'm going to be past the cardboard demon. I just love this so much. I'm so glad you described it that way. I'm going to steal it from now on. And it's like, I can just go limp because I still have that programming in my subconscious to be afraid, but most of me knows I don't need to be afraid. So that disconnect is kind of making me paralyzed. Like, I don't know how to walk past a demon, but instead of judging myself for that, go limp into it and know that my higher self is literally dragging me across the finish line, and not in a forceful, toxic way, in like you are literally dissolving the cardboard as you go through it. So don't worry and don't rush it. You don't have to be uncomfortable. There is no choice for you but to move forward into this light, and don't struggle thinking you're not doing a good enough job. It's like, you're fine. And I'm like, okay, it's a little hard for me to relax into that because I'm used to just being like, no, but I must put in the effort. I must knock down these walls. I must have this arsenal energy. And I'm like, I'm not arsenal energy, even on myself right now. I am completely in yin mode. I cannot do shit, and I don't want to do shit. I'm like, somebody give me some guidance. And I think that's what that vision was when I went into that feeling of just let go. And things are going to come to you that help you really just pull that cardboard demon apart in an easy way.
Ooh, I'm so glad you also said that thing about arsenal energy, because that brings up another download that I wanted to share that I'd forgotten to write down, which is that is arsenal energy. Again, another one of the things that's kind of like my bugbear is this idea that arsenal energy has to be resistant or in opposition to something to be effective. Like it just feels old school to me. Old school ideas about what it takes to create change. So, and also very like the masculine paradigm. So in order to, for institutions and systems to be destroyed, we have to fight them and resist them and oppose them and put all of that energy of pushing, when you can actually very effectively allow things to fall apart by completely obliterating all resistance and tapping into like that magnetic passive destruction of just like, that's very peaceful. And I think we're being called more and more to move into that way of effecting change and leave, because in order to like, it's not that you can't use that energy of opposition and fighting. And it's not that you can't do that and even do that from a place of deep compassion and non-judgment. You can, but it's not the only tool in our arsenal. It's one of many. And the allowing things to fall apart from a place of peaceful, just knowing that it's going to be okay is very effective. It's very effective and can work very quickly.
Wow. That is, I have been kind of on the edge of making that a download for myself as like an actual thing that I feel in my bones, because I can get it intellectually. And I think I was there, getting the concept for myself in meditations and all that. But now when you said it just the way you did, it went Gandalfed right on in. I was like, yes, I don't need to judge myself for this type of work collapsing the old, because it doesn't feel like the old paradigm of like, oh, you're supposed to do something. People are holding that energy, but now my job has morphed into holding the other energy of allowing, and it feels uncomfortable. And trust. Geez,
the
trusting and the knowing, which has been probably number one, top two core wounds for me, is trust and knowing, and trusting in my knowing. So I know that that's a block that I put in for myself as part of like the power I have to transmute that for myself and the collective, whatever I've agreed to take on for that role this time around. Oh, wow. That felt so good to finally feel that. Thank you, KK.
Something that came to me for the changes that I think I can expect to experience with the earth. So again, holding this paradox of acceptance and also faith, faith and hope, and acceptance of that change does involve some destruction and some loss and stuff, but also faith that there doesn't have to be as much suffering as we have a tendency to predict and forecast. So when I was around 25, this was something when we were talking about our awakening stories that I forgot to mention, was this period in my life where I was in a relationship with someone, a man who was actually very interested in like esoteric things. And he got interested in astral travel, lucid dreaming, stuff like that. So we started reading books around it, and we had just moved in together, and he had moved into the apartment that I had been living in with another friend. And I had my two kitties, Fistique and then her mom, Pork Chop, and he brought his two kittens that he just adopted, who are adorable, Spike and Marmalade. They're so cute. Spike was black and white, so silky soft and so cuddly, and Marmalade was just like the gentlest, droopiest little cuddle bunny of like pure joy ever. He was orange and white. And then Pork Chop went to live with my mom because she didn't like being in a 4-cat household. So it was just Fistique, Spike, and Marmalade. So we were living together, and he started to get into these things, and we were reading these books and like going down this path. And he actually had an out of body experience in where he like felt himself go up through the levels. We lived in a small apartment building. It had, I think, 3 floors and just like a few apartments per floor. And we were on the 2nd floor. And I started to get I had a whole creepy experience with like this entity that wanted me to say its name in the night. And I did not want to say its name out loud. And my partner's name was Alex. I woke him up and I was like, I know this is really weird, but I feel like there's a presence and he wants me to say his name. And I do not want to say his name. He was like, ugh. And then also Marmalade and Spike, but especially Marmalade, started chatting with something. And I got it on camera and like run around and looking and chatting at something. They would look up at the ceiling and like be like, and like just have these whole long. And I was like, what the hell? Anyway, we had those, like, this was like all in like a period of just a couple of months. And then cut to the middle of the night, we were woken up, the fire alarm was going off. And we were completely disoriented. The power was out, so we couldn't get the lights on. So we couldn't find the cats. It was like a big apartment too. It was like a big 4.5 with a lot of space. Couldn't find anything. And we weren't sure what was happening. And I thought, oh, we'll just go outside and then come back in for like, we'll see what's happening and then come back in. And then we got outside, they immediately like took us away and we couldn't go back in. And it was actually the apartment right above us where the fire had started. And it was very, very tragic because 2 people died. It was this man, he was drunk on his birthday and he lit his barbecue inside and it exploded. So he died. And then his roommate died trying to get out of the fire and jumping out the window.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So very sad. And like very much, I'll get to it afterwards in terms of the other thing that I think we're integrating right now, which is our fire energy, which we have a lot of collective trauma around. I have a lot of like past human life, so much fire trauma. So this was definitely a continuation of that karmic journey. So we were outside, like we were each just wearing like one slipper on our feet. I think it was like October, it was cold, I forget. And we were just like freaking out because our 3 little cats were inside. And we told firefighters and they're like, okay, we'll go in and look. They went in. This is like, there was like hours and hours. It was excruciating. And then they went in and he came out and he was carrying Spike and she was like, I've never heard a cat scream. She was like screaming at the top of her lungs. And they were like, the orange kitty died. We're sorry. He died of a heart attack, we think, because he was just like lying peacefully on the floor. Yeah, it was like,
whoa,
getting emotional.
That is intense.
Yeah. And then they didn't see Fistique at all. And so I didn't know if she was alive or dead for, I think it was 2 or 3 days later when we were finally able to go back to the building. I'd given up all hope, which is me and Fistique. This is our story, which is another story for another day. But Fistique, from the time she was born, literally her birth has been a series of miracles where things look so dire and I've completely given up hope. And then she survives. So like Alec went around the back and then he went in and he like came out with her and I like lost my shit so bad. We were so completely devastated by Marmalade's death. But the interesting thing was, and I've seen this happen again with other passings of like animals who are close, was Spike after that. Oh, also we had this local vet who just was so nice and saw all of our cats for free and like took care of them afterwards and like checked them all out for smoke, and stuff. And he did it all for free, which was really lovely. But Spike took on a lot of Marmalade's personality. She became way much more of like a very calm noodle who just like, before that she was more like a naughty kitty and you could kind of cuddle her a bit, but then after that she was like just like you could cuddle her constantly. So she really took on a lot of his qualities. And yeah, and Fistique had like hidden in the kitchen somewhere. I mean, the ceilings had collapsed and everything because it was literally the apartment right above us. And we found Fistique and she managed to hide out and survive like the little fucking miracle survivor she is. So there are a few things that have happened in my life like that, very dramatic to say the least, where I was like, okay, these are pointing me towards stuff. But I was reflecting on the fire and our relationship to fire and all the wildfires that have been a part of this climate stuff. And I was like, okay, I see what they're trying to tell me. They're saying the things that are lost, the energy of the things that are lost is going to transfer into things that are still there. There are going to be things that we're able to just outright save and preserve, like Spike being carried out, and there will be trauma. The things that are lost, their energy is going to transfer into things that remain. And then there's going to be things that we think we've lost and we lose all hope. And then it turns out that they weren't lost after all.
Very cool. Wow. Yeah. I love that. I came across something the other day because I'm so news stories. It's like my obsession of like, where are the new fucking stories? I know we're writing them and I know part of it is rewriting our trauma and healing it and that kind of thing as part of, instead of seeing yourself as a victim, you see yourself as the hero or whatever the fuck, you rewrite your narrative and that's a new story. And I was thinking about how energy is never lost or destroyed. It's always just transmuted into something else. And so part of my frustration with being still stuck in the old fucking stories of so much shit, I realized that we need the energy from the old stories in order to create the new stories. So it's like, it's a slow transmutation and process from the old stories. So we're seeing some new stories, like as we heal ourselves, for example, or even on like TV and some certain shows I've watched where I'm like, how the fuck did this get made? This is a huge, not just a breadcrumb, but a slice of bread. And it's that transmutation of the energy that takes a minute.
And it was actually you that got me reflect, like you were the trigger point for me to go back into that fire story and think about that, because it was when we were in San Francisco and we went to the woods. And then afterwards, I forget, it was some talk about like maybe Cascadia and the earthquake or something. And if the forest were to like go into the sea. And I was like, I just don't, I feel like that can't happen though, because those trees are so important to the earth. Like, I feel like they just, and then you were like, well, if they did, their energy would go into something else and it would still remain. And I was like, and then that's what really got me back into that fire story. And I was like, oh, right. That energy that transfers.
That's cool.
Just again, like, yeah, reckoning, having a different understanding of death and change and stuff. I have to put my button that I always put on the fire story because it's so grim, which is a very funny thing that happened afterwards. So it was like a few weeks later, we went in with some friends. We were like checking to see if there was anything salvageable and like doing like recon for the insurance, which very luckily we had insurance through. I had it through my mom because I was still a student, because we didn't have renter's insurance on our own. So we go into the building. So of course the power is still all off. And and in the lobby, there was this little gift bag on the floor. And I was like, oh, that's so thoughtful. Like someone left a bunch of flashlights, and I reach in and it was a bunch of dildos. Somebody had, for some reason, gone back into the wreckage of a fire and then been like, oh, I need to grab all my dildos. What do I put them in? I'll just put them in the gift bag. And then been like,
my God,
you know what? I don't want these fucking, like, these dildos have bad juju now. And they just like left them behind. It was just like, oh, I touched that with my hand.
Oh shit. That is that was brilliant. Thanks for adding that part of the story. Wow, of course you needed that part of the story to occur so that you could tell it and have that button to add to it. Thank you, dildos.
Also, I had the most lovely Sonia King, the animal communicator. I had a session with her. She's like, Karen Montowski is friends with her and has her on the show a lot and talks and like uses her for her dog Courage all the time. And they have the most hilarious conversations about Courage. So I did a session with her mostly for Fistique, but then she's so efficient. She was like, any other cat, animals from the past. So I asked about Marmalade and she was so comfortable. She was like, no, it was just, she was like, Mrs. Time, it was fine. He was like, I gotta go, man. He was great. Like it really brought me a lot of peace around that.
That's awesome.
Incident. Because if you can imagine the guilt of like leaving your little babies behind, and you're like, I'm just going to go out for a second and then I'll go back in and get them.
That sucks. I can't imagine that at all. Because sorry you had to go through that, but man, what a powerful lesson
I love what you said about the stories, though, the narratives. And that is really...
It definitely brought me peace where I had been really holding on to severe frustration, to put it mildly.
Yeah. Well, these emotions, it's so funny with like spirituality stuff. You hear the same things over and over and they don't really sink in, but they're true, but they don't really. So, the thing about having compassion for all of our emotions and stuff, and not putting this emotion outside the box as like something separate from all the others, that's just ruining everything. But I had this breakthrough. I already told you this off air, just where I got really anger has been a hard one for me, where I always feel no matter any expression of anger at all. And I'm like, oh God, I'm like the worst. I'm just an abusive piece of shit. So my mom can still sometimes really push all my buttons. So I forget what happened. We had a conversation and I just hung up and screamed at the top of my lungs, but it was the middle of the day. No one was home. It was just an empty building. So normally when I do that, I go into this like horrible shame spiral that lasts forever. And I just beat myself up and I just feel really gross. And then I started to do that. And I was like, wait a second, this is completely healthy release of emotion that didn't harm anybody at all and just got it out of your body. And so I was like, okay. And I felt, I was able to feel like a lightness around anger that I hadn't before. And then I was like, okay, remember this, because anger is, I'm already like done a lot around anger. I was like, that's not really the really tricky one for you, isn't anger so much anymore. It's when it's other stuff. So then I was like, like that thing that you were just able to do for anger, I was like, remember that, because these others, and for me, it's more worry, fear, anxiety, and doubt, and self-doubt, and then like self-recrimination around those spirals. Those are the ones that I was like, remember to carry that same thing of like, nope, it's fine to express those and it's fine to feel those, and carry it over into.
Hell yeah. Good for you. That's hard and powerful.
Which isn't to say that I like then magically did that perfectly, but it was just helpful. I was like, I know this is coming soon, so keep it in mind.
That makes a lot of sense. Sometimes I don't enjoy the foreshadowing because I'm like, ooh.
I know.
That's going to come up. Cool. God damn it.
Oh my goodness. Oh my God. One last thing on the hell realms and like being able to move in and out of them. I think it'd be helpful to like, maybe for some people, to think of yourself as like a tourist or a traveler. Because sometimes, at least for me, I can get really bogged down in feeling like, because my imagination creates reality, then I am responsible for every single, like little tiny my avatar is responsible for everything, instead of, no, you're part of a large web and there's a flow and there's, divine timing and all sorts of things, and just relax and go with the flow. I'm like, no, that means I must control everything. And if bad things are happening in reality, then like I must flagellate myself. So it's like, instead of focusing so much on me creating reality, I was like, what if I look at it as like, what version of Earth do I want to visit? Like, I'm planning a trip, and it's like, it's like, oh, do I feel like the hubbub of a big city? Maybe I'll go to Hong Kong. Or do I feel more like, getting really into nature, and maybe I'll go to Costa Rica and whatever. Do I feel like a beach vacation? But in this one, you're like, oh, do I feel like visiting like the hell realm versions of Earth, or do I feel like visiting like the really chill utopic realm versions of Earth? And then like plan your trip, like plan your trip of like what version of Earth you want to visit, and then let that guide the way.
I like that. Be your own Virgil.
Yeah. And you're like, well, I'm not, I've done a lot of traveling in the really dense, kind of sticky areas. I've experienced a lot of that good old Earth suffering. I've done a lot of traveling in that region. I think I'd like to go for a really relaxing, extended vacation
in the hell realm. Well, that's where we fucking been. Well, I mean, yeah, we were in the underworld, but like I was projecting a hell realm of my own in 2021 and the beginning of 2022.
Or yeah, maybe you're like, I want to experience the fun underworld. I've been in this, this neighborhood of the underworld. It's not, it's cracked up to be. I really want to go over to the Berlin part of the underworld. It's really popping. Really great nightlife.
I immediately, as soon as you said Berlin, I was like transported to a dance hall.
I don't so much want the Greyhound bus station at 2 a.m. underworld part of the trip. Yeah, I want the nice, Berlin nightlife version. That will be more fun.
That sounds divine.
Right?
Absolutely divine. And I am not even exaggerating one slight bit. I really want to go to Berlin.
Yeah, I know.
Go out just dancing.
Yeah, because I mean, everybody's idea of what's fun is different, right? Like, so it's not, which also I cannot believe how well this meandering conversation has allowed me to touch on almost everything I wrote down that I wanted to touch on. But the other thing is just a thing that I have harped on about online before in videos, but just our shadows, emotions. It's like the shadow behind the shadow. We think of the shadows as like, oh, my rage or my this or that. But the shadow is just the thing in yourself that you can't see or rejecting and don't see. And so it's our relationship to like positive and pleasurable emotions is a huge shadow, and we don't trust them, and we don't think that they're fun. We have this like programming that they're not fun to experience for more than like a sliver of time. And then it has to be like, oh, I'll have a little sliver of contentment or the tiniest fleck of joy. And then I'll give myself, weeks of anxiety or overwhelm or busyness or whatever. And then maybe a little other crumb, because otherwise I'd be so
I need to
bored
break.
all the time. And it's like, aren't you already so fucking bored? What? Like, no.
Exactly. I feel like that is oh man, I really don't like sounding like a conspiracy theorist, but I feel like that's propaganda. We have swallowed propaganda of like, you can only have so much joy because it's boring or mush brains you after a while or whatever. Cause I have that deep, especially now that I can like zoom out and see the world, the bigger picture of the game that we're playing. And I'm so much in that perspective of zoomed outedness that I'm like, okay, yeah, of course, I hate the suffering, but you know what? I would do it again, because if I had spent 800 million eternities in paradise, I would want to like feel some resistance or whatever. And I'm like, okay, that's fine for the zoomed out level, but allow yourself on the human level to also experience more than a fucking crumb. You can have 8 million infinities of joy and awesomeness equivalent in your human lifespan or whatever. And it's still okay. You're allowed to. You've had a lot of
also
suffering.
not letting in the full depths of those. And I say this as someone, again, so as I was saying, in my hell realm, what's holding me here? This is definitely one that holds me here. I have this issue, but we don't know what those states of being feel like because we're not letting them in fully. We're holding so much other stuff that we have no idea how much there is to explore within those states.
Yeah.
I've said this before too, like if you like high contrast, direct it towards something, direct it into your creative output or some part of your life where it's more enjoyable so that you can get out of directing it into your personal life or your finances or your health or places where it feels really, where you're just sick and tired of having those high contrast experiences that have a lot of density and suffering.
Yeah.
Like it's fine to enjoy contrast, but you can do it in a way. And that's the thing, like it's the programming that we put on ourselves, because if you didn't have that programming, you would immediately not go through any of your soul lessons where you just be like, right away, because it needs to be we need to have really, really powerful programming that tells us that good things are hard to come by and that we should only have a little bit of them and good feelings, and let difficult things happen like in an instant, and it's really hard to prevent them from happening, and we should have a lot of them. It's normal to have a lot of them.
Whew. That definitely feels like a lighter, or at least not as deeply rooted root of the wound that I feel, but it's still there. So I know that like I think it's definitely on its way out. I feel the ease with which it could eventually start. It is going to start eventually just coming out, but like it's still there. And I'm like, oh, but everything's going to be bad in a minute, even though I know in another part of my body that that's not true. It's the other shoe is not going to drop. It is okay to have a good life and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, of course. And again, all coming back to like the trauma response aspect of it, that we feel safer when things are going off, because it's like, well, they're already going off. So, but whereas if they're going well, it's like, who the fuck knows what could blindside me? I just love that after it's like, we've lived through a fucking pandemic. We've lived through so many blindsidings that why not be having the best time of our lives while they happen to us, instead of like a miserable or at best mediocre.
Yes. Yes. Oh man, I cannot drink enough to that.
I was drinking mezcal, but I mixed it with the last time I traveled internationally, when I went to Italy, and they had these, the sodas there, they have those nice like bitters in them. So they had this one was like Chinotto, and we were able to find it here. And so I mixed a little bit of that with mezcal, and it's like getting me in a traveling state of mind.
Sounds so good. Oh, when do you leave for
Valentine's Day?
Oh yeah.
Which is also, speaking ancestrally, it's my maternal grandmother's birthday. and she loved traveling. And I always feel like there's a photo of me from the trip to Italy, and like I really look like her. Like it's kind of uncanny how much I always feel like she like comes on in for a little ride when I go.
I mean, yeah, totally. They're here with us.
We're gonna have monkeys on our balcony. It's unfathomable to me. I've not done that kind of adventurous traveling, but I feel like we got through so much. And like I said, that it really does give me a constipated feeling when I'm like not
sharing the downloads. Yeah. Free flowing with whatever words needed to come out. They came out. It was a fun one.
Whee!
Yeah. I don't have any parting words of wisdom. Don't water down your truth.
Write in and tell us what's keeping you in your hell room.
And on that note,